right, welcome back to the Crushing Iron podcast.
The final episode of February. It's February 28th, 2023. Welcome aboard, you fantastic people. This is the Crushing Iron podcast, episode 662.
Yes. Welcome, fantastic people.
Fantastic people of Earth, of the U.S., of all over the globe. It is a strikingly gorgeous day here in Overland Park, Kansas. Not a cloud in the sky. It's going to be 60 today, but fret not. Winter is not over. We're expecting 3 inches of snow on Thursday night. So it is that time of year where Mother Nature tends to play her games, and we're getting a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We got flowers blooming, then we got them dying immediately, and it's allergy season pretty much early on in February. So start your preload, get ready for the year, and then as usual, as most triathletes do, once you hit your first 60 degree, 65 degree run that kind of pops out of nowhere, just remember all your fitness gone.
Yeah,
gone. Totally gone. I am unfit. I think I'm done. I'm not progressing. You do like 30s, 40s, and then you have that like really weird like 65 degree day. You don't know what to do. You're not playing for it, and you come back and you're totally dismayed. You're disappointed. You're frustrated. But fret not. Again, it is just the transition of seasons, which always takes a little bit of time to get used to. Kind of like our warm up. But your first time tuning in, welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. Just so we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life. Not just as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. We also talk frequently about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level triathletes looking at the very first 5K or sprint triathlon, all the way up through elite level amateurs trying to get back to the world championships, and everyone in between from all over the globe. And we use the feedback loop we have with them and training peaks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion of the day. We also frequently utilize our Facebook group, which we'll do on Thursday. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Answer one simple question, we let you right in. Awesome people, fantastic resource, amazing community. So if you're looking for a nice, safe, informative place to learn more about the sport, with a lot of awesome experienced individuals that have been around the block, done it all, probably made the mistakes, and also succeeded a whole lot. And a group that's willing to lend in and answer your questions. Be a part of the group. Don't be a lurker, but participate. And we'll occasionally go in there and do a Q&A. I actually just dropped in the request. We'll be a little bit outside of the month. We usually do one once a month, but you know what? February, they kind of shortchanges us. So we'll do that on Thursday, so the first one of March. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We definitely don't do ads. But we do have an agenda, and that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sport journey.
Yeah. You know what else makes you think you lost your run?
What, not running?
Yeah, slacking since run camp. But he's back.
You're back?
Oh,
He's back.
He's back.
You like, define for us back.
Schedule in, dialed in.
Okay. Define. Before we go into our more detailed topic for today, talk to me more about dialed in.
Honestly, what that means is one day at a time.
Yeah.
No, I know. I actually was thinking about that. I'm like, how crazy we can seem sometimes. Like, I've been doing okay, getting to the pool a little bit here and there and on the bike. But when, I was getting back into my run swing again last night, and about halfway through it, I'm like, I'm podium. But it's just funny how you get when you're in the middle of a workout.
Swings, right? From DNF to podium.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like, I know everyone goes through that. You kind of get out onto a run sometimes or whatever it may be. And I mean, this is just a testament that exercising makes you feel better, more confident, and more dialed into life. And I was just on there, and I was doing this silly little treadmill thing. I'm like, I'm feeling pretty good. All right, I'm turning it up right now. I'm going to turn it up, and we're going to see what happens. And I'm like, dude, what the hell is that? And then I woke up this morning sore, so I'm like back and, you know what I mean? It goes back and forth. But I just think it's really interesting how one workout can affect you in so many ways. You know, we see it a lot. It's like, that's what I hate the most about going to run camp is that, you know, I miss you will miss several days in a row because of, you know, we're out in the middle of the woods and all that. And then we come back and then I'll start catching up and I'll see, oh my God, I was on fire today. This is the best thing ever. And then a day later, I don't know if I can finish. I don't know if I can cut this sport. It's just like bringing me down. You know, it's like literally the mood swings. And I was just thinking about the mood swings within a workout. It's nuts sometimes. But so I'm just trying to keep it level-headed.
Well, I think that's one of the hardest things to do. And we're going to talk a lot about effort and zones today. One of the more difficult things for people to kind of wrap their brain around. There's a lot of different zones and methods and calculations used. But before we get into that, I oftentimes, like, you know, and we talk about not being a prisoner of the moment. And most athletes are a total prisoner of the moment when they do, you know, one workout. They immediately raise expectations, and then one bad workout is they immediately lower expectations because they change too much, right? But what I do often find, and I think it's a great exercise for athletes to do, is before you grade yourself on a session, right? If you do grade yourself, and you're not a person that, which I always encourage, is just a person that does it and moves on, right? And just kind of takes everything with a grain of salt. I did it. It felt fine. I got the job done. It's all part of a plan. It's all part of a process. And we'll check back in a few weeks after being consistent. You know, most athletes don't. They walk out, they're like, yeah, man, I really want to do this today. For no reason other than that, they just want to. And so always ask yourself when you get done with the workout after you initially grade it or give yourself a score and check back and look at your Strava segments and your medals and training peaks is why do I feel like I need so much out of this workout? And that's a big thing. It's like if you're having a really, really bad day, you know, and you have a bad workout, that's when you see athletes have even just like total swing of the pendulum. Like, maybe this sport isn't for me. I'm the worst runner. I'm never going to get better. You know, and then as a coach, you like peel back 3 days before and you're like, didn't you just have like your fastest 3-mile split like 3 days ago? And like, yeah, but that was 3 days ago and it's whatever. And you have to remind them. But on the other hand, if you're having a really, really rough day and you have a great workout, it just kind of brings you back to medium, right? It doesn't like totally turn your day around because if you're like most triathletes, you always find a but, right? Yeah, I was crushing it today. I was having a bad day. I just think the GPS was off. The GPS is, I think, a little bit quick, some cloud cover. I was running by the creek. Heart rate's a little bit low, but I was using wrist space, so it's probably not right. And can't take a win for a win, right? Can't even give it to them. And then the opposite goes for like if the athlete's having a really good day and they have a successful workout, it just kind of layers in, and then that's when they take the leap from, you know what, I was feeling pretty good today. It's going to be a good year. And like, it's going to be a good year based off your 35-minute zone 2 run you did this morning, right? Or the other way, and you're having a great day and you have a subpar run, it's easier to let go. And so I just think it's a great reminder, I think, for everyone, no matter what time of year it is, but especially kind of like we were joking at the outset of the podcast about, the upcoming temperature changes and the swings where, it's 81 day and the humidity is high and, we've all forgotten about dew point. It's been irrelevant because it's been wintertime, is to, not put all your eggs in one basket, and to not get so disappointed or overly excited about just one singular session, right? It's all about building things one on top of the other, day after day, week after week, month after month, and for a lot of people, year after year. So don't be a prisoner of the moment. Enjoy the ride. And again, always be, I think, objective and do some introspection after each workout. If you see your mood and attitude swing one way or the other based on the session, really ask yourself, what was I really expecting to get from this? And is it unfair to the workout itself? And am I just kind of being a little bit oversensitive to the moment, the fact that my day is just already kind of going poorly or going great, and just take the workout for what it is and move on? Yeah,
I think there's a good lesson there, man. I think it's sort of like not replying to the email that when you're angry. It's sort of like
don't hit send, right?
Sleep on it.
Herm Edwards, don't hit send.
Don't hit
That's
send.
Like his famous thing, don't hit send.
Yeah, and step out of the workout, and it might be a good practice actually for people to think about what was good in there. Like, step back and say, well, yeah, I didn't feel like last night I got in the pool at Del Boca Vista. They're doing the aerobics on the one side. And then I was the only one swimming, except some guy came in. He looked like about my age. And, the water there is, it's kind of a resort. So it's a little warmer. It's not super warm, but it isn't cold. And this guy kind of walks down the stairs in the lane next to me, and he's hanging on the rope, and he's kind of looking at me, and he's kind of smiling, and I'm like, what? He goes, oh, it's cold. And I go, it isn't that bad, man. And then he just eventually took off and he swam down to the other end. And then I did about 5 100s, and he was still standing down there. And he swam back eventually, and then he got out. It's like, it's that thing is something about, most people aren't doing anything near what we're doing on a regular basis. And the ability to step out and say, man, I'm grateful to be able to do that, even if I didn't feel like in top form. That was one of the things I was swimming. I was like, man, how you just start, you start feeling like you're in swim shape at some point. And I think for me, it's always kind of a gray area, because I could be swimming okay, but at certain points during the season, I just start feeling strong where I can just start throwing down 200s or 300s repeats without a problem. But last night I was just sticking to 100s because that's where I'm at. But it's interesting, to be able to step back from that and not worry about it, because it comes around if you just put in a time. It comes around fairly quickly. But I just think it's a good idea, if you start your comments with something positive, it might set a different tone, or your thought process post-workout, whatever it is. If you find the nugget of goodness in there, instead of being like, oh man, everything that in the world's going down, but all in all, there's got to be something in there. I got a guy who does that every time. He always writes something great at the end. He's like, what he felt, if even it was just the weather or how he felt.
Yeah.
He could breathe, his lungs felt good, or he saw some, animals out running or whatever. It was just a good thing, and I like that practice.
Well, it all comes down to, the story that we choose to tell ourselves, right? Are things worse than they really are, or are they better than they really are? And you could swing, one way or the other and say, yeah, well, one person's being naive and one person's, being, too negative. But, for the most part, the more positive you can be, the better the better things are going to be for you, generally speaking, in all areas of life, right? Yeah, you might act naive, but some people, are realist, optimist, a pessimist, whatever it is. Always after your sessions, give yourself a pat on the back, right? Because you did it. And I think that's one of the biggest things, and that we always say, and I know I do specifically, is it didn't have to be pretty. You just had to get it done, right? There's a whole lot of great things in life and in training that just happens because you get it done. And before we get into the topic, speaking of getting it done, our training plans are getting it done right now. Big thank you to everybody who has gone on the website. Again, that's c26triathlon.com, and got one of our free sprint and Olympic plans. I think we were cruising close to 200, which is kind of crazy to think about, doing it and generating it just from the podcast. That's like the field size of a lot of sprint and Olympic distance races, 200, like local races, like is 150, 200 people. So to think that we've had a small part in almost filling up a race with free plans and education and training is pretty cool to think about. So a big thank you to everybody that's taking those in and then having the opportunity to hopefully have a great training year and some guidance along the way. We appreciate you. And I also think, going to the spirit of our year, which is talking about the sport from a growth standpoint, starting at from the beginner level, intermediate level, sprints, Olympics, working your way up, and I find the topic of zones something that even the most seasoned athletes struggle with, right? Everyone hears the word zones. What are my zones? How do I calculate my zones? Well, my zone is this, or I'm running faster in this zone, or I'm running slower in this zone, or what about my heart rate? And now there's 17 different metrics for people to track. They've got, running, they've got heart rate, pace, and power, right? And then, same thing goes with, on the bike, they've got power, they got heart rate, they got speed, and they got kilojoules, all these things to take into account. And sometimes they'll overlap, sometimes they won't, but it can become very, very, very confusing, not just from how to test it and how to do it right, but also what method to choose, right? So today, one of the things we're going to talk about is zones. Everybody's heard the phrase zones when they talk about, a typical zone 5 model is what a lot of coaches use, and a lot of athletes use zone 1 through 5. You have some coaches that'll use a 3-zone model, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, or what they would call like A1, A2, A3. So you can have either one. The one we'll focus on today is the 5-zone model, because that's the one that most athletes are familiar with and the ones that they can actually test. First things first, and we say this a ton before I get into the nitty gritty, and my favorite way of testing and then the methods and the calculations that we use for a lot of athletes is before you even begin to test and apply zones, 2 things are incredibly and insanely important. Number 1, learn yourself, learn your body, learn your reactions, learn what it feels like to go hard, learn what it feels like to go easy, and then see the corresponding pace to what you think and feel. Because sometimes they're way off. Some people need extended periods of time calibrating what feels right and what is right. Because I thought I was going really slow, but I was definitely running too hard. And some days you're going to have that, but a lot of athletes get caught going way too hard when they're going way too easy, and that's kind of where I'll comment, hey, this was a little quick today, right? Your heart rate was 10 or 15 beats higher than it normally is. Either you ran way too hard, or you didn't comment on any extenuating circumstances, like it was really hot today, or I overdressed, or I'm super stressed. Like things like that is obviously a way to keep track of things. But number 1, especially if you're new to the sport, and even if you're not new to the sport, if you got into the sport we've already got power meters and all these different gadgets to tell you what you're doing and to tell you how fast you're going, to tell you how there is no substitute for knowing yourself and knowing your body and knowing what feels like what. I know you're a huge advocate of that. I know with all your athletes, I am too, and I'm very thankful that when I got into the sport, that's really all we had. It was like effort. You had heart rate monitors, but a lot of it was run easy, run hard, run moderate. That's it. That was your 3-zone model when I got into the sport 20 plus years ago, was run easy, run hard, run moderate. That's it. That's all there was to it. And so you got to really, really learn your body. And I am thankful for that, because it is a skill that I developed and have held on to, is really understanding, what am I pushing, what feels too hard, what isn't too hard. So number 1, know yourself, learn yourself. And if you're an athlete that has been a total data junkie and only looks at the numbers and stares at it 24/7, please take time to disassociate from that. Do some of the numbers games we talk about, whereas, hop on your bike and don't look at your power meter for the first 15 minutes and then take a guess, right? Guess what your heart rate is, guess what your power is, and then guess what the RPE is, and then see if it translates, see if it matches. If it doesn't match, you need to recalibrate, right? And figure out ways to better understand who you are. Same thing goes with running, hop out, don't look at your watch, have it covered, and then every mile split, have the mile pop up. And then when it pops up, before you even look at it, guess what the pace was. All right, it feels like an 8:40. And you look down, it's an 8:10. All right, well, let me double check my work. Was my heart rate low? Yeah. Okay, maybe just having a good day. Carry on, right? Don't slow down. Carry on. Conversely, if it feels like an 8:40, and look down, and it's an 8:20, but you go and double check your work and your heart rate's a 160 when it's normally in the low 150s, then you're going out too hot. Or it says 9:30, then you're like, oof, let me double check my work. Heart rate's the same. I'm just having a rough day. But slow down, stay the course, listen to your body. And I know you're a huge fan of that.
Absolutely, man. I think it's at the core of everything, really, because when it comes down to it, I mean, certain people, I guess, can get that dialed into no level or any level, but, the bottom line in racing comes down to, like, what do you got, on any particular day at any particular time. And you have to be able to calibrate that and roll with that on the fly a lot. So that's the thing for me, is that I've just, I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I got into this, and we were doing the training stuff. I don't remember even once paying attention to that kind of data for my first Ironman or half. And all I know is that when it said go hard, I would go hard, and I would just like get after it. And And then a lot of times we'd run together or do shit together, and we would do easier stuff and just kind of cruise. And it was just kind of, I don't know, lucky or whatever. But needless to say, man, I just would do things like I would always attack hills or something like that and try to recover and really just get a good feeling. And then it was funny when I first did get out on like a half Ironman course, I felt really prepared. I mean, we did the work, and I think, you know, just because I hear it so much that, you know, people get out there and things don't go their way or whatever, you know. So that was kind of always my baseline was, how do I get through this, or how do I figure out what's going on? And you know, that doesn't mean I need to look at my watch, you know. It means I need to figure out what my body's trying to tell me and adjust to that. And some days on the opposite side, you might be feeling good. And like you've said it a lot of times, it's like, if you're feeling good and you know you got something, you don't have to back off necessarily. And if you know that you can handle what's going on, that's a really big asset, I think, is just understanding. It's like, okay, man, I got, 7 miles left. Do I have this? And just sort of intuitively, or it's like a gut thing, you know. They always say, listen to your gut's never wrong. And the more you pay attention to those things, the better you get at it. And that's just sort of how I like to train. It's just as simple as even yesterday, I just knew what I had in me in the pool, and I tried to push it a little bit more or whatever. And then I just stopped because I've talked about that before, where I know that I have a lot left in me, not a lot, but I have some left in me, but I think it's going to put me over the edge for the next day or something like that. And I'll just pull back and kind of, pack it in and come back and fight another day or whatever. But, if you're trying to, I actually got in there last night without my watch on, or I had it on, but it died literally right as I got into the pool. I was like, oh, and I'll admit that can be, it's such a weird feeling, dude. You know what I mean? I'm sure even though we talk about it a lot, and I don't wear my contacts in the pool, so I can't really see the clock or anything. So I was like, shit, I got to do this whole session without having a clue of what I'm doing. And it doesn't really matter because I'm not, I'm far away from a race or anything like that. And like, what does it really matter? But it was just a different feeling to not be able to see how fast I was swimming. I'm repeating 100s. I was kind of curious, but after a while you just get in that zone and you're just like, I know what I'm doing right now is making me better. And in the long haul, I can't put a number on it right now, but I just have this intuitive gut, perceived effort feeling that this is the right thing to be doing. And I just think that's like the hardest thing for people to find out or figure out along the way. I think based from what I see, it's like, but when you see people have those kind of mini breakthroughs or whatever, and, I had a guy race this weekend and he wasn't paying attention to his watch. He was just kind of flying. And I always find that interesting when you tell people to cover their watch during the race and just run. And that's just got to be the scariest feeling for some people. But there's a lot of beauty in that, and being able to understand that and know what you have in the tank and just knowing your limits by feel.
Or in understanding that most of your limits are self-imposed, right? By how you train and what you see. And I'm not capable of this. And I know I mentioned this quite a few times, but I think the 2 or the 3 of the best races I've ever had, period. Two were 70.3s. One was a marathon. The 2 70.3s, I took off my heart rate monitor in the first, half mile of the run. Because my heart rate was like Chattanooga 2018. It was, good God, it was like 178 or 178, 175 coming off the bike, but I felt amazing. And I took it off and handed it to Renee Black, who was an athlete, and around the corner, like the very first, like not even like barely at a transition. And I was like, I remember looking down at my watch and my heart rate was like, that high. And I was like, which is my threshold, like way above threshold. You can't hold that for 13.1.
Right.
And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, but you feel good. Disregard. And so I just took the strap off because I didn't even want to know, because I knew it would mess with my mind. Same thing happened back. I did Augusta 70.3. Oh, man, 11 years ago, I think. Best run I've ever had. Yeah, it was 11 years ago. And I did the exact same thing. I felt unbelievable coming off the bike. I think it's still my best like half marathon split at some point. There's like a 1:30. And I took out my heart monitor because it was telling me all the things that I didn't want to know. I felt great, but it was causing confusion. And on top of it was causing self-doubt. Oh, you're going to blow up. You're going to blow up. But I never did. I actually ran faster both times. So it's again, like understanding, knowing yourself, but then having the confidence to run with it. Literally speaking, have the confidence to go with it. And that's why, measurement is such a, I find measurement in zones and training prescription and intensity best suited for times of restraint, not for pushing an athlete, but for restraint. If you really, really want an athlete to go hard, you tell them to go off feel, because then they don't have these numbers that are coming in that are clouding their internal, governor or their judgment of what actually feels hard today. In training, it's great, right? Because you can prescribe the right training and prescribe the right intensity, the right duration, get the right stress, equals the correct, adaptation. But even then, you want athletes to kind of own the day and decide, you know what, I didn't feel good today. You don't force it. You back down, right? You back down and live to fight another day. But a lot of athletes have trouble doing that. But when it's time to race, we say this a ton, especially this time of year. If you're doing, 1 miles, 5Ks, 10Ks, even half marathons, run it blind. Just roll with it. But what about the data at the end? You tell me how you felt, and I'll see your pace, and we'll know what happened. That's all you need to know. Period. That's all you need to know. Because all we can see, or what we can see before all that, is your training. So we know what happened. How did it feel? Great. How did it feel? Terrible. What was the end result? X, Y, and Z. So we know what worked and what didn't. The biggest feedback you can give a coach is your personal rundown. Hey, I felt pretty good today. Hey, I felt terrible today. It was humid. I overdressed. Today it felt amazing, right? It was cool outside. There was no wind, no dew point, no humidity, or man, that was rough, right? And so you have to be able to judge yourself and understand these things and be really, really good at just feeling your own self out, pushing yourself, being the person that pushes yourself, right? Because that even comes into play. I think one of the first 2 years I was starting to coach full time, and an athlete called me the morning of Ironman Boulder, the morning of. It's like 6 o'clock. I'm like, what? What do you want? My power meter's not working.
Oh,
okay. What else? Did it rise up like a transformer and slap you across the face and break your trachea? No. So what are you calling me for at 6 o'clock in the morning on race day? Well, my power meter's not working. All right. Right off feel. And it's like a foreign light. You're like, what? It's like you're asking them to pedal backwards on a unicycle, like to ride by feel. I don't know what to do. They end up having a PR bike split and had an Ironman PR riding off feel. I mean, it's not impossible, and it's actually makes things more possible. But you have to know yourself. But if you don't, then you're gonna show up to a race. Your watch is going to die like yours did the other day. Your power meter battery is going to die, or it's not going to be calibrated, or all these things. Your heart meter is not working. Your foot pod's acting up, and you're going to be lost, right? All the confidence you may have had down the drain, totally down the drain, all because a piece of technology isn't working. It doesn't change anything about you, but because you can't read it or see it, you're unsure. So step number 1, always learn yourself first. Spend time doing it. Dedicate runs to learning about yourself. Dedicate races to learning about yourself, to learning about field, to learning about effort. Because, and again, before I go into my favorite kind of test to do to establish those and what kind of format I like to use is, above all that, and after you even establish those zones, whatever kind of, system you do, always trust yourself. Don't force yourself. And and that goes both ways. Force yourself to go faster because you're not feeling it, because you got to stay in zone, right? Or force yourself, to do less, right? Because you're going, quote unquote, way too fast compared to what you should be doing. Even though heart rate's low, you feel incredible Yeah, but my pace was a little bit too fast today. No, it wasn't. You feel great. Run with it, And so that's just, again, huge, small little, caveat, but an incredibly important reminder to use, or just to have for everyone to have. First things first, swimming. For most people, and I would say in the way I do things, which isn't the way for everyone to do things, but I never prescribe pace zones for athletes, just because swimming is so technically based that even a small change or unchange in stroke mechanics can affect your pace dramatically. I'll give the best analogy I can between the three sports, because the other ones are, running is slightly more technical than cycling, and cycling is non-technical, right? Fixed foot to a fixed platform, it rolls, 360 degrees no matter what you want to do. The best analogy I can give, though, is it's like telling a person that you give them run zones that are the same no matter what they do in running, and you don't have like a different zone maybe for a person that wears like, super shoes. Like super shoes are significantly faster for a lot of people, right? And as long as they can run, we're talking like 5, 10, sometimes 20 seconds per mile faster, especially at higher speeds. That's like saying, oh, well, you can go the same effort and get a faster pace going easier, but you're going to overlap pace zones by using, extra technology. So I think with swimming, the reason I don't give out pace zones is because, again, you can tell an athlete to swim, between 124 and 135. One technique improvement, and they're doing low 120s, they're going to slow themselves down, right? Probably to go back to their other form that slowed them down in the first place. If you have something that clicks, like an athlete I was reading this morning, hopped in the pool, and he was like, dude, my last 300s of the main set, I did this different thing with my elbow, and I was swimming like 4 to 5 seconds faster per 100 than I ever have before. So think about that for a second. Yeah. So think about that. So you're like a roll with it, which is so swimming. You had that like light bulb moment. But think about if the athlete was like, yeah, coach, you had me, in zone 2 today, which is 130 to 140. And I had this like, I ended up swimming, in the mid 120s. So but I was doing something different in my form. So I slowed myself down to be back in the zone. Like you can see me screaming like through the computer, through Training Peaks, out the other end into West Virginia. No, like do what feels right. Or the same goes for, I felt really tired. I was super sloppy today, so my technique is bad. So it's not, 130 to 140, it's 149. But they're going to force themselves to be in that 130 to 149 range, or 130 to 139 range, by doing worse form at a higher speed, right? So they're having terrible form, they're practicing terrible form, and they're going at a higher effort level. So probably their form is zone 1 because it's shit, right? Because they're tired and they feel like crap, but their effort zone 5. So they're getting nothing out of it. So for me, swimming is all about either percentages or feel, right? Easy, moderate, solid, cruise. This is the terminology that I love to use, because it gets you in touch with what things should feel like. This feels solid, right?
Yeah.
I'm swimming strong, right? Or we use fast sometimes, but rarely fast, because fast usually means Spasm. 10 out of 10 effort, crappy form, worse speed. Versus 90% strong is like most of the time our top end zone. 90% strong means swim the fastest you can swim with the best form possible. And that actually usually gives you the lowest RPE with the best form and the best pace.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. Yeah, I know. I always say like stuff like all out in the pool is 90%. And we try to, I guess, appeal to, most triathletes, and I know everybody's different, so certain people, but it is funny how you can watch somebody just blazing lanes and they're just like, they're not doing anything, but they're obviously working, but it's just all such a compact, dialed in form from every inch of the stroke is just working right. And for me, it's always about being able to hold that, and like that story about the elbow or whatever, and increasing 100 or 4 seconds per 100. That kind of stuff definitely happens. And then I think you got to realize that sometimes your fitness isn't quite there to hold that for, the whole race or that type of distance. So that's when you kind of got to get your form again, and just sort of build the not only strength but flexibility to be able to do that. And that's certainly one of my biggest issues. Is I think that's why with the pool, I am big on this long and strong thing that you've started with me since the get-go. And a big part of that is just because it helps me build the flexibility and the overall strength, so I don't always have to, reach as far as I can, but I just want to make sure that I'm getting a good catch and I'm getting a good reach and I'm pulling strong. And over time, as I swim more and more, that strength and flexibility come together, and then things just start seeming easier, and he always hears like, man, I warmed up today. I did a 200 and that was my fastest time. And it's like, okay, so what's going on here? We got to really set that in, and just being able to do that and hold form over a long period of time, a lot of times does come down to being relaxed and confident that you're doing it, because over, throughout the course of a set or a race or something like that, I know that, really what happens is, like you always say about the jump shot, it's not that you forgot how to swim or your form starts slacking. It's just that you're just not strong. You're losing your strength throughout the race or throughout the sets. And that's just very interesting. But like when we're talking about swimming, I think it might be advantageous to go back into what you always say, which is people don't like being, hypoxic in the pool, and like how hard it is to actually, go strong and really kind of get out of breath, because it's just so unnatural to be horizontal and really feeling that while you're in water.
It's just one extra thing for people to think about in the pool when they're already thinking about enough. Mm-hmm. And the fact with most athletes, again, like for 95 of triathletes, probably over 95% of them should totally disregard, any kind of zone or pace ranges, because what you should be working on is how do I swim faster, easier, right? And improving your fitness and your speed with technique. And that's where, swimming sets itself apart from the other two. Is it's so, again, no fitness increase, right? No major new gadget or helmet or wheel, but just straight up one, your elbow is popped a little bit earlier and all of a sudden you're swimming 5 seconds faster. Like that's the kind of stuff that gets you. It's not necessarily free speed, but it's the closest thing you're going to get to in the pool, right? Is that free speed and body positioning and feel. Those are the things you should focus on, not the constant, what pace, because then you're just practicing the speed you already are with the technique you already, accepted. You're not going to get any faster. Cycling, on the other hand, is I find of the three sports, the hardest one for athletes to zone properly. Because one, as per usual, the species of humans and triathletes specifically, what started as the gold standard of testing your quote unquote threshold started at the 60-minute, right? And as typical triathletes would have, it's now down to 8, right? Mm-hmm. Now there's, Trainer Road or anything in Zwift is like, let's do the 8-minute ramp test, and this will give you a really good idea of your functional threshold power. And again, this is for, a wide range of athletes that listen and have different access to different platforms and power meters. And I'll talk about heart rate too, because everybody has a power meter. But it's the one where I would say if I was a betting man, I would say 8 or 9 out of 10 triathletes have their functional threshold power, or FTP, way too high compared to what's actual reality. So functional threshold power, for the sake of this argument, that you would see in most training and how you would input it in for your zones, is this your 60-minute best power, right? That's what they call your threshold, even though that's not technically what it is. I mean, we might talk about that towards the end, but it's 60 minutes. So you're now trying to do it. And what happens is most athletes test it with a 20-minute, or they used to. Now that's like long, right? 20-minute test. I'm doing the 8-minute ramp test. which is so ridiculous in my opinion for so many reasons. So what happens is you do like an 8-minute ramp test, or you might even do a 12-minute test or a 20-minute test. And then 20-minute, you take 0.95, or so for some people 0.92 of that. And, let's say your 20-minute power, your 20-minute test power is 200. Well, you take that and you multiply it by, let's say, 200 times 0.92, which most people should probably do, and that gives you a functional threshold of 184. Well, the problem I have with this, and I have a lot of problems, is I feel like if we're on Seinfeld, I got a lot of problems with the threshold tests. Is for one, it doesn't tell you where your power is coming from, right? Is it from a really, really, really high VO2 max, number, or is it coming from a really, really, really low VLA max number? Are you more aerobically based? Are you more anaerobically based? Where is it coming from? And so it only gives you the number, right? It gives you the equals, and doesn't give you the number plus the number equals this. So equals 184. It doesn't tell you where it came from. So that's my first problem. The other problem is that it can, much like the Garmin, marathon predictor on your watch, you can go out and run nothing but 30-minute runs for a month and a half. Then you can go out and run a 5K all out, right? And you'll bust out a really great time. And then what pops up? Your marathon predictor. What? I haven't even run longer than 10 miles, but based on your 5K, you can run this. No, you can't. You don't know if you're a short course kind of person or a long course. And if you haven't put in the mileage, you don't have the aerobic capacity, then all of it's meaningless, right? Your 20-minute power, your 3-minute power, your 6-minute power does very little to tell you what you're able to do for 6 hours or 5 hours. And then what percentage is it based off that? So that's one of the big problems I have with the standard 20-minute test, and I won't even ever have anybody do a ramp test because I think they're ridiculous. Plus, how well do you test? Some people test awesome. Some people test terrible no matter what. Also, a test is something that you do, especially if it's one singular test, like a 20-minute one. You put so much weight behind it that you feel the pressure for most people. So a great thing to do is like sneak it in, or have 3 to 4 different intervals that combine to equal out one result to give you the best shot at the best answer. Once you've got your 20-minute number, and for athletes that just use regular power meters and get their numbers from this 20-minute test, is we do something called the 4DP test. I find of all the tests I've ever had any athlete do, I find this the most accurate of all the tests, because you still do a 20-minute effort, but you do it after you've already done some incredibly difficult efforts. And then for most triathletes, the best part of it is that there's no future calculation. So if you want to find your best, I think testing format, don't do ramps, don't do 12, do the 4DP test. It's a 5-second interval, a 1-minute interval, a 5-minute interval, and a 20. And the kicker, and the reason I love it, is you could do, you start out with the 5-second sprints out of the gate. You take a little bit of time to rest, and then you do a 5-minute emptier. You absolutely freaking empty the tank. It's going to be miserable. At 2.5 minutes, you should feel like you should honestly feel like you can't finish. And then find a way to finish. Rest easy. So you got your 5-minute number. You've just blown it out, right? The best thing about that is if you take 78 to 80% of that 5-minute number to start out for your 20-minute effort, it's an unbelievable predictor of what you can hold for those 20 minutes. And the reason I think the main reason I love that is because a lot of athletes struggle with pacing, right? They start out way too hard after 12 minutes and they fade into the distance and then get a terrible result. That's right. Or no result because they quit early. A test is no good if crap in and crap out. That's what happens. So I love it because of that, number one, because it gives you a starting place, right? A reasonable starting place based on a percentage. And then you do your best effort for 20 minutes. And then after that is over, you have your 20 minutes. No calculation, no extra this, no extra that, just your calculation. So you take that 20 minutes, again, 4DP test, do it correctly. You can look it up online. I think Sufferfest, Neil Henderson is one that kind of made it really, really popular. Very, very excellent cycling coach, good triathlon coach. He used to do Glenn Jorgensen's cycling back in the day. I think also Flora Duffy. Then you just go into your settings again. I'll talk Training Peaks, language here because we use Training Peaks. But then you go into Training Peaks and you click on zones. Then you go down and click your power, update it, and then I would always suggest clicking the Coggin method. So Andy Coggin, they call him like the godfather of power. He's got a book all about power, racing with power, and then update your zones accordingly. Use his Coggin model. If you don't have access to a power meter, and I'll talk about it's very similar to the same method we use that I use for running because I would do it by heart rate. Is you do a 30-minute all-out max effort, no holding back. After the first 10 minutes, lap your watch, and then take the last 20-minute average heart rate, not max heart rate, average heart rate over that 20 minutes, and use that, and then use your Joule Friel heart rate zones for cycling to use that as your parameters. Again, cycling isn't nearly as beneficial to go by heart rate because there's so many things to take into account, just like there's just running. But if you can measure with power, it's great. And with as many people as have indoor trainers and power meters these days, it used to be like you were very, very special if you had a power meter, and now either you have it on your bike, pedals, crank based, wheel based, whatever it is. A lot of people have them, or they've got a smart trainer, and that has power on it. So those are the best ways to deal with power. But again, you're still only getting, one type of number, not really the behind the number. Maybe we'll do a future podcast on that, but it is the best way. But again, you will never see worse results if you drop your quote unquote FTP 5 or 10 watts below what you really, really think it is. If anything, you'll be in a much better zone with appropriate intensity and be able to handle more. That's why you see so many people running themselves in the ground, is because they have these ridiculously set threshold zones based off a ridiculous test that only measures what you can do for a certain period of time, not your other training. But it's also way, way, way too high. So you think you're doing, zone 4, but you're doing zone 5. You think you're doing zone 2, but you're doing zone 3. And again, if I had to bet, 9 out of 10 triathletes all have their FTP way too high.
Yeah. And I got this thing too about, I like that because, that we talk about testing and you can have a good day or whatever. And then the next thing, the whole season becomes like a little bit of too much of a struggle maybe, or something like that. And I've always used the drumming analogy because when I started drumming, you had to go at a certain pace and you had to master certain levels. You had to be able to master certain sticking routines at certain paces before you moved up. And, it was one of those things where I was a terrible drummer, don't get me wrong, but I could go into a situation like an open stage or something to play like a, speed metal song. But by the end of it, I'd have like gray hair and shit, and my whole stress level would be I wasn't really there. You know what I mean? You can kind of get there once in a while and stuff. And you've talked about, and we've talked about how, setting power numbers for races and stuff like that. And, when you took me through that a while ago, it's very interesting because it goes back, it's like, you can take the test and you can kind of look at things, but when you go back and look at long rides and how you performed in certain days and certain temperatures, certain altitudes and certain elevations and things like that, you get a really a better number, in my opinion, because, like you said, it's just got to be realistic. It's like I see so many people struggling to hit, they had maybe a good test and they're in the whole, why not master that level? And if you feel good that day, you can go over a little bit, it's sort of like go into what maybe you are, but until you are at that level and you master where you're at, I just think that makes much more sense. It's like swimming too hard in the pool and you wake up and you're sore and everything like that. But if you can own where you're at and really nail it over and over, that's when we can talk about like scooching it up a little bit. That's the other thing is like, I don't know. I suppose pro athletes are always kind of in testing mode. I mean, I don't want to say testing mode, but they're always probably paying attention. Do you know that actually, if throughout the season, like the elite athletes, are they kind of moving their FTP around, every few weeks or something like that? or every month?
So it's an excellent question, and a whole bag of worms
Okay.
to go. But I would say most age group athletes, 9 out of 10 age group athletes test their FTP more often across the year than professionals do. Because professionals don't quote unquote test, right? Their test is in training,
Yeah.
right? Or or if they are testing, again, they're not testing their FTP, right? They have access to software programs or in-lab testing where they're testing their VO2 max, right? Or, it's very, very, popular right now to do lactate testing. So they're measuring their lactate in every session that they do, right? Because they don't want it to be too high, right? Because they're trying to do specific things with their physiology. And so that's the biggest thing. 100% the biggest difference in pros is how they test and what they test. They don't do FTP. You won't see them on Zwift doing a ramp test. You won't see them doing Trainer Road doing 2x20, maybe for a workout, but not as a test. They don't do that. Again, if they're testing, they're measuring numbers, right? VO2 max, right? How high can my VO2 max be? How low is my VLA max, aka like the rate in which you produce lactate? How low is that? And then they use those numbers to guide the training and decide what training to do and then how they're going to rate. Because those two numbers, right, your VLA max, your VO2 max, give you 97% of what your FTP is. But when you do an FTP test, you don't know where the values come from. You don't know the distribution of that 97%. It could be 50 and 40 and 50 and 47. Could be 20 and 77. Huge difference. You don't really know what to work. Again, it's podcast for a different day, but that's not. They don't do that. And age groupers are obsessed with it for whatever reason. I think it's more of like an ego chest bump, thump kind of thing. What my 20-minute power resist, and I raise my FTP up by 4 watts. Okay, well, you're in the same zone pretty much. And that's the other thing is, unless you're going to see a significant jump, if you look at the ranges, especially if you use like the Kage method, let's say your FTP is like 280 or 300. Your zone 2, as he has it, is like 25 watts wide. So if you have like if you have a 10 watt increase, for the most part, guess what? You're still in zone 2. There is no it's insanely significant change to it. The other thing is, and you brought up this in your comments, was, it's how you test. And because the biggest issues I have with a lot of testing is that athletes will save up for it, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to you're going to do it on a recovery week. So you're super fresh and you're blast at this best 20-minute effort. And then 95% of the rest of your training is under load. So what happens is you have this massive overlap in range enmeshment where you do a test fresh, overly fresh, because you don't train fresh, right? You train consistently 7 days a week. You put in 3-week blocks, down 1 week. So you take a lot of time off. You go and you nail this test, right? You probably limited stress. You did everything perfectly. You say your power is 300. And then you do your calculation that gives you 280 and change, I think, or 278, 280, low 280 and change. Well, now you go and then your calculation's off because you were way too generous. It probably should have been a lot lower based on your aerobic capacity and a number of different factors. So you set your FTP too high. Then you go into regular fatigued training with tired legs. So now you're in a more stressed day-to-day life, right? So what you're doing is you're asking an athlete who's overly fatigued or has fatigue with additional life stress that's accumulated at week after week after week to aim for a watt range that is significantly too high based on a test result and a too high of a percentage. It's like asking a 6-year-old to dunk on a 10-foot goal. You can try, you can try, you can try, you can keep trying, you can keep trying, you can keep trying, but eventually you're going to quit and you're going to walk away because it's way too hard. Or, you're going to have it close and you're going to bury yourself to hit the bottom of the range. Bury yourself. So you're still not even working the system you're supposed to, because very, very, very few sessions should be bury yourself sessions. Very few, period. They shouldn't be that hard. They should be appropriate. But again, we have this obsession now with burying yourself and I've got to crush myself 3 days a week on all these kind of, like, that's great, y'all. But all you're doing is working one part of your system. And in fact, it could be negatively impacting the other part of your system, which is insanely crucial for a long course athlete. So again, huge, excellent question, but there's just so much that goes into it. And especially with cycling, that people, they bury themselves like 3 times a week and never ride easy, and then they wonder why they have a terrible aerobic capacity and efficiency at long course racing. And then they end up having the shittiest ass runs. It's because you used every single bit of your glycogen stores on the bike, no matter how much you're fueling, because your efficiency is terrible. Yeah, you could smash it for 4 minutes, baby. Yeah, I got this PR climb on Strava, but your 3-hour, aerobic capacity, fat max, whatever you want to call it, is shit. And so all you're doing is churning and burning through carbs. That's it. And glucose and glycogen, all of those. And you got nothing when you go run. But you want to do, you blame it on the run. You blame it on the run.
Yeah.
Most of the reasons you're crappy on the run is because you're crappy on the bike in all the wrong places, right? In all the wrong places. So yeah, it's a lot that goes into it, and I think it's just but it's not fun, right? To market that way, to get efficient, and how you get efficient. And it's hard for athletes even to wrap their brain around, what we've always seen as the golden goose of cycling is FTP, when it's really not. It's all that goes into it that we don't really know, or that most athletes don't really know.
Yeah. They should have to put their last marathon time next to their FTP on
right. Yeah.
On the profile.
It's no, but it really is. It is fascinating.
It's hard enough to get on the bike without having a zone you can't hit every day,
Yeah, it's discouraging.
That's the way I look at it. I just want to get on there. If I get on, I'm winning. And then it's like, okay, if I can get anywhere near it, I'm winning again.
Yeah, like there's this, I'll talk about running as it's a lot quicker as we finish up here. But one of my favorite things that my watch does when I'm finished, and I think Training Peaks does this, but I got on my run this morning, and it's how did you feel? And it starts out, I felt normal, or I felt, this was moderately hard. 99% of your training should be easy training. The other percent of it should be moderately hard. Like negative 1% or less should feel like it's destroying you. But that's the opposite, right? Gotta train harder and be faster to get faster and be harder. And like that works for all about 2 seconds. It's like you need the hammer and the nail. All you got to do is get the head flush. But see, if you keep hammered, what happens? You splinter the board. And that's what so many, especially self-coached athletes, that get obsessed with these Zwift programs and trainer road programs, is drive people into the ground, into the ground. I work with an athlete now who was coached for a number of years, and she said to me the other day, no matter what comes out of this, testing that we're doing, my HRV has never been higher, and I've never felt this healthy and fit. But it's taken me months to get out of the hole that I had dug, because I was doing so much and going so hard all the time. People don't understand that. Like, you don't really recognize it. I think when you're in the middle of it, you just kind of assume you're supposed to feel tired and run down, but you're not. There's an appropriate level of training and the dose you're supposed to have with it to get better. Everything else is extra, and anything extra is too much. Extra isn't better. Extra is too much. And so I think that was a comment I gave an athlete over the weekend, that their first 50K was, or I did another 50K. That was, kind of apprehensive when he did it, because we hadn't done his usual, overrunning in training. And he kind of commented like, hey, maybe this running less is more thing, is better, or what do you say? He said, maybe less is more. And I responded, less is enough. So it is more. And that is one of the hardest things for athletes to wrap their brain around, is less isn't more, less is enough, right? The right amount is enough. more is actually less, because you're degrading your performance and your inability to do better in your next session. Speaking of next sessions, your run, as we roll through the end, running. Again, I treat it, I do heart rate, but I treat it a lot like the swim. I always tell athletes, learn effort, because in all races, I got an athlete doing Ironman New Zealand on Saturday, and I just tell people, like, 100%, I'm not giving you a pace, period. If I do give you a pace, it's like this really, really, really slow pace for the first 4 miles, and then you move into it. But I don't do any pace zones for athletes, because there's too much range, right? In terrain and how you're feeling. I could tell you, hey, Mike, go run 10 minutes. 10 minutes, run 10-minute pace for, 30 minutes. Well, if you do it at 4 o'clock in the morning, when you're feeling incredible, it's cold outside, there's no dew point, flat terrain, it's going to feel like zone 2. But if 2 months later, if you did it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's 98 degrees, humidity 100%, dew point, 70, and you're in the middle of a hard training week, guess what? That 10-minute pace is going to feel like a fucking zone 4. You can barely breathe.
Yeah, right.
Not getting the same response. So I always push and encourage athletes to run by feel and know that, right? And 85% of your run, you should be able to breathe in and out your nose. Period. That's for me, that's always the aerobic. Can I breathe in through my nose? And not just, breathing in and out of your, like you're, going hypoxic, know yourself with running, right? So I use that. I use effort with running. If I do have an athlete do heart rate, I do the same thing I do with cycling. You do the 30-minute all-out effort. You lap button it after 10 minutes and take the last 20-minute average, not the max, the average, then plug it in Training Peaks zones, Joe Friel running zones, running heart rate zones, and apply that in. Heart rate's a great thing to do in running, because it does. It shows you. And I didn't mention hills, right? Like the difference in hills. It's like the best example I can give is, in cycling is, somebody who tells you they rode 100 miles and the other person rode 80. Which one's better?
Yeah.
Oh, the 100 for sure. Well, what if the 100 was with a tailwind half the time and totally flat roads, and they rode with a group, right? And then in perfect, perfect weather, no wind, no dew point, low humidity, perfect temperatures, with a group, flat, 100 miles, easy, right? The person that did 80 but climbed 4,800 feet of elevation gain in the heat of the summer alone produced and used more energy, right? If you see KJ next to any of your data, it's kilojoules, energy used more than the 100 miler. So they got a better training response in the 100 mile. And that's very similar to me in the back and forth and the yo-yo between pace and heart rate and effort in running is, you tell somebody to run 5 easy miles, it could be a 10-minute difference based on the terrain and the weather, but you give them based on time and effort and restraint, then no matter, it could be 3 miles or it could be 3.5. You can't cheat time. And it's the best way to manage stress is through time, not through, miles. It's just very, very, very hard to do that. So that's the zone we use for that. But again, running very, very similar to swimming, listening to your body and knowing what effort feels like because going up a hill, a lot different than going down a hill, right? Rolling terrain, very different than flat terrain. Wind, very different than no wind, right? Same thing goes with dew point, humidity versus cool temps. That's why you got to know yourself and trust yourself regardless of the zone model you use with running.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Good with that?
Yeah, I am.
I feel like I talked a lot today.
Well, I mean, you're passionate about zones.
I was zoned in.
You were zoned in.
Yeah, I was zoned in. But it's one of those questions we get a lot as coaches, and you see a lot in the Facebook group, and you have people that still use the 220 minus your age plus 10, and don't even know, and their zones are way off, and they're way high, or they're way low. They're just not accurate. So if your zones aren't accurate, your training isn't accurate. And the biggest thing I can tell you is before you even remotely think about testing yourself, get a base level of fitness first. I tell you, are we going to test the first week? No, you ain't done shit in 6 years. We're not testing the first week. You're going to barely make it through a test. You're going to croak 8 minutes into a 20-minute test. I'm not having you test before. You don't have any fitness to test, right? You want a reasonable level of fitness, 8 to 10 weeks, good aerobic work, skill work, so you can actually put together a decent test. Then you prescribe the training. But you got to have a good, solid base level of fitness before you do anything that's meaningful. Don't just test out of the gate. You're going to destroy yourself and learn nothing in the process. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. And if you appreciate us, go to the website, c26triathlon.com. It is not only our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community, but also our online store, which is where you can show that appreciation. And while we don't do sponsors or ads, we do allow for opportunities for you to support the podcast through purchasing gear. So click on that tab and find some gear that you fancy. Give it to yourself, or give it to a friend, or give it to your dog. Doesn't really matter to us, but it's a great way to support us. And we thank you and appreciate everyone that has purchased gear in the last few weeks and months. As always, if you need anything from Mike, he's available, crushingiron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me specifically, c26coach@gmail.com.
Should we get dog bandanas?
They're probably not. We got gaiters, man. People can use the gaiters.
You got to slide it over the dog's head, though. That's probably uncomfortable.
Well, that's probably true, but it depends on kind of.
It's a thought, though. In the meantime, if you want a dog gaiter, we've got them.
Yeah, exactly. If you want a dog gaiter or a dog scarf for medium to small dogs, we got those too.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that wraps it up. You know, I could keep talking about zones forever. I do like zones. I think they're important. I mean,
they're very important. They're often misunderstood and frequently terribly calculated.
Yeah.
I could spend an hour on the fucking ramp test. Hey, let's start with an hour. And then, you know what? I think I've got it to 6 minutes. Let's do it. And then we'll count. I'm like, just stop it. It's one. And I said we were done. And you got me. You do this to me all the time. You just like, we're walking away from the fire. There's one spark left. And what's he do? He tosses freaking gasoline. And he's like, let's watch him go after this. Gasoline blows up. You know how easy it is to go all out for 6 minutes? We've gotten so soft. The tests haven't been because they're more accurate. The tests is because people have become increasingly mentally weak when it comes to pushing themselves for long periods of time. So these platforms don't want to encourage you to do a 60-minute test because you can't do it because you don't have the goods to withstand 60 minutes, or we know it's going to hurt your ego so much to see your actual 60-minute power, or you drop off the bike like a fly after 45 minutes. That's bad for business. So, but what we know you can probably do is hang on for 6 or 8 minutes. So let's do a ramp test. Because I know you can't handle 60 physically or mentally. It's because we've all gotten soft. It's ridiculous. Anyway.
Yeah.
I digress.
All right.
No more gasoline. We'll see you on Thursday.
All right, buddy. See you, man.
See you.